So, Assalamu Alaikum, everyone. Uh, Today we're going to be starting from Surah 25, uh, uh, the statute book, Al Furqan, from the beginning of the Surah. Let's all seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. Most blessed is the one who revealed the statute book to his servant, so that he can serve as a warner to the whole world. The one to whom belongs all sovereignty of the heavens and the earth. He never had a son, nor does he have any partners in sovereignty. He created everything in exact measure. He precisely designed everything. Yet they set up beside him gods who do not create anything. They themselves are created, and who possess no power to even harm or benefit themselves, nor do they possess any power to control life, uh, or death, or destruction. Okay, so first of all, this surah is titled the Statute Book, and that to us basically shows that this book is full of statutes and or laws that govern how we live our life in this world, and everything is fully detailed in our statute book. If there are statutes that are not described in the statute book, then that necessarily means that it's not a statute of our religion that we need to follow. And foremost, the verse is talking about God being most blessed because He revealed to His servant this statute book to serve as a warner. Um, and he never had a son, nor did he have any partner in his kingship, as we all know how people have idolized, Jesus as a son of God, and other religions have associated partners with God, such as so-called Muslims have associated Muhammad as partner with God, and others have deified the Messiah, as I mentioned earlier, and so many people worship the saints, etc. And the world being Satan's dominion is plagued with idol worship, everywhere we look. And if it's not these entities, there is religious leaders and scholars that people will easily idolize, over God, and stand with them, etc. uh, and so basically, people will end up setting up gods besides God. And, I mean, you could also set up other gods besides God, by giving them power, because it says these people possess no power to even harm, or idols possess no power to even harm or benefit themselves, nor do they possess any power to control life or death or destruction. Basically, so when we try to give any power to any entities besides God, whether it's power to harm us or benefit us, those become our idol necessarily as well. And so, we have to be aware of that as well. And um, um, also, when you, for example, get in a position where you will basically, give power to someone. Let's say, you can give power to, for example, your boss, for example, and say, your boss is the one who's gonna, or your prospective boss is the one who's gonna hire you, or your boss is the one who's gonna fire you, or give you promotion, etc. And without giving the power to God, you're making him as an idol, because we know to God belongs, all the power, and He's the one, who controls everything. So when we give power to anyone to harm us or benefit us, either way, you set them up as an idol. It could also very well apply to like very general situations in our life. I mean, you could, for example, get upset really quickly over something that someone is doing because you believe it's this person that's doing it, and you forget that God is the one who's controlling everything, and you start giving this person power to the point that it starts affecting your own happiness. And at that point, you are giving this person or thing, power, and that's why you are, you're ending up, paying the price with losing your happiness over it. Um, Verse 4, the disbelievers rebutted by the Quran's mathematical code. Um, those who disbelieved said, "This is a fabrication that he produced with the help of some other people. They have uttered a blasphemy and a falsehood." They also said, "Tales from the past that he wrote down, they were dictated to him day and night." Actually, just before I continue, actually, let me read the footnote for 5, and I'll also read the footnote for 2. So, the footnote for verse 5 says, Muhammad's contemporaries knew that he was a literate man who could read and write. He wrote God's revelations with his own hands, the Appendix 28. So the reason why this footnote mentioned here is that, most traditional Muslims think that the miracle of Quran is that Muhammad was illiterate and he didn't know how to read or write, and then when the Quran was revealed, he could read, but obviously they thought he could not write. But but it says, here that these people that were with him, they were saying that literally, that he wrote down with his own hand with the help of other people. So that's a proof in itself that Muhammad was a literate man, as we learn from the Quran. And then mm, also, I forgot to read the footnote for verse 2. It says, this was for where the part where it says he created everything in exact measure. He precisely designed everything. So this is a huge topic, basically. Uh, the preciseness of everything that God has designed, and the footnote says, when we launch astronauts into space, we measure precisely the amount of food, water, and oxygen and other needs throughout the journey. Similarly, God has launched us into space on board spaceship Earth, and He has designed all kinds of renewable provisions for us and other creatures, a perfect design. Think, for example, of the symbiotic relationship between us and the plants. We use oxygen that they produce in photosynthesis, while the carbon dioxide while they use the carbon dioxide we produce in respiration. Um, so, I mean, this is a footnote is very specific about comparing uh, our life in this world, and all the processes that are put in place to a spaceship that we might launch into space, and all the systems that scientists may be able to put together. But if you compare that to anything that the best scientists in the world can ever produce, I mean, it's really amazing because, I mean, as we know that they can't, you can't provide them oxygen and reproductive astronauts and renewable. I mean, the astronauts could be reproductive, but I mean, it's not that because they're astronaut that God has created, but not in the sense that, if you created a machine, for example, and you launched into space, I mean, and you gave them food, the food could, reproduce itself and, have its own resources and whatnot. And, everything is precisely designed to, you'll never have any disruptance. And uh, the symbiotic relationship that it talks about, for example, is so amazing. I mean, you find that not only between plants and humans, but among all different creatures on Earth that God has put in place. I mean, the balance is so intricate that, for example, if you took out all the bees in this world, for example, I mean, you'd have to spend millions of dollars just to be able to sustain the cultivation process and whatnot for all the crops that will be affected by billions probably. And this is something that, for example, the bees are seamlessly doing every day. and things like that, that we don't even realize. I mean, all the bacteria in the world that God has created that decomposes, like all the waste, for example, or all the plants, for example, that turn back into food and materials, that substances that we utilize on the planet for our survival, right? There's so many things, right, when we think about it. And this footnote is also verse is also talking, referring to that. And then coming back to verse 5 and 6, 4, 5, and 6. Um, Verse 6 says, "Say this was revealed by the one who knows the secret in the heavens and the earth. He is he was forgiving, most merciful." And the footnote for verse 6 says, "The Quran's miraculous mathematical code, the incontrovertible answer to disbelievers' claims, remained a divinely guarded secret for 1400 years. God's messenger of the covenant was destined to unveil it by God's leave." Appendices 1, 2, and 26. Okay, so these verses are, really packed with a lot of proof about what they're saying. So even though these people thought that Muhammad fabricated it with his hand and stuff like that, and he wrote it down with the help of other people, and some people said, he copied it from the Bible and whatnot, and people continue to say that about the Quran to this day, for example, but it refers to uh, the secret, the mathematical code of the Quran as well. And it says it was revealed by the one who knows the secret in the heavens and the earth. Now, the secret, it's singular, and this secret, as we learn from the footnote, refers to the Quran's mathematical code. Um, and some people, are indifferent, and they think that, this doesn't mean anything, and this is just referring. I mean, this is no big deal. If so, what if there's math? Math doesn't make you a messenger or whatnot. But this was revealed by God through His messenger of the covenant, Dr. Rashad Khalifa, and it's significant because, like it says here, uh, as an answer, mathematical code is the incontrovertible answer to the disbelievers' claims. It remained a divinely guarded secret for 1400 years, right? So, I mean, why would if it's no big deal, then why would it remain a divinely guarded secret for 1400 years, right? I mean, it's not like uh, uh, something that anybody could discover, if I mean, at least, you could say, well, he didn't have a computer. People didn't have a computer back then, but they could still discover the basic facts. For example, Bismillah contains 19 letters, or even count the number of times that Allah was mentioned and things like that. I mean, it would still be difficult to do a lot of these things, but a lot of the geometrical value related calculations could have been done. For example, through using simple addition and stuff. So at least they could know the very basic facts. But Muhammad, like, didn't even know the basics. For example, like, if someone asked him, like, what does Alif Lam Mim mean, or ALM, I mean, he wouldn't be able to answer those questions. And nobody, like even the biggest scholars, if you ask them, like, what does ALM mean, they would be like, well, that was just a secret between Muhammad and God. This was the best explanation that I had heard, for example, also before I, became a submitter. And so the thing is that, God is the one who revealed it, and He is the one who put the secret in there, and He's the one who decided who's going to bring it forward, and the person, and God authorized this person to reveal this information. Typical utterances of disbelievers, verse 7. And they said, "How come this messenger eats the food and walks in the markets? If only an angel could come down with him to serve with him as a preacher. Or if only a treasure could be given to him. Or if he could, if only he could possess an orchard from which he eats." The transgressors also said, You are following a bewitched man. Note how they called you all kinds of names, and note how this led them astray, never to find their way back. Most blessed is the one who can, if he wills, give you much better than their demands, gardens with flowing streams and many mansions. Um, so apparently, this is something that people use as an excuse to believe in messengers, and the messenger of the covenant was no different. I mean, he was also, faced with similar statements from people, and even amongst people that claim to believe that he was a messenger of God, they still have trouble accepting a lot of the message because of the human aspect of because they continue to stress on the human aspect of the messenger that he was just a human being, and even though he was a messenger, but he was a human being, and so like he has his opinions and whatnot, totally disregarding the fact that he was sent as a messenger to us. So the religious message in itself is something that we must accept, if we are to accept a messenger. And so they expect a messenger to have like gardens, not be human like doesn't walk in the street or eat food, or it comes with angels and things like that. I mean, these are unreasonable requests because it's part of the test. You have to believe in the unseen. If you see the unseen, the test is over. So it's part of the test. And then uh, things that they call, how they portray a person of God who is bringing them the truth so they could save themselves, causes them to go astray. They call him a bewitched man. Actually, uh, the Quran the Quran proves that, for example, Muhammad was not bewitched. But that's another interesting point. But if you look at Hadith and Sunnah, I mean, like they say Muhammad was bewitched because people, so and so tried to do magic and sorcery and witchcraft. Uh, the people that hated him and Muhammad was so kind to them and all that. But obviously that contradicts the Quran. Just a side note. But God's, says here that He can give him much better than these things that they ask for, but it's part of the test that things have to be left obscure and hidden. I mean, if, for example, if 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 I do one prayer today and you see my soul grow like I don't know, a couple of tons, heavier, then everybody's going to know that this is the truth. I mean, what would the test be about? Like, if you could see the dimension of souls, then the test would be over. So, but all of these things, I mean, or if somebody could see your credit in the hereafter, by doing such a thing, for example, obviously everyone would want to do it. There's no test there, but that's how God has designed this test. And the real reason, verse 11 says, in fact, they have disbelieved in the hour, day of resurrection, and we have prepared for those who disbelieve in the hour a flaming hell. So that is always the real reason. The thing that distinguishes a believer from a hypocrite always ends up being the belief in the hereafter. Like people have trouble understanding the fact that God is the one who uh, can he was omnipotent enough to resurrect us. I mean, this seems to be the biggest hurdle people have. People forget how God revives the land every day with, for example, like when you see, the plants coming back to life every season, the fruits coming in, you plant a bud in the ground and a whole tree, comes out of it and things like that. You plant a seed, same thing, right? I mean, and we see, things like cloning and all that stuff. I mean, how we understand that there's genetic information and even something so small, and you can create an entire being from it if you are God. So, and knowing that, we were nothing and God brought us here. I mean, how did we come into life? I mean, once you really think about it, and really reflect on it, y God will allow a person to understand if if they're destined to be guided, that this is very easy for God to do, And God says it's very easy for him to do. But the thing is that since people decide to disbelieve in God's omnipotence, he blocks them out. And at that point, they just are blundering and saying nonsense. And we see that all around us every day. Uh, Retribution for disbelievers, verse 12. When it sees them from afar, they will hear its rage and fuming. And when they are thrown into it, through a narrow place, all shackled, they will declare their remorse. You will not declare just a single remorse on that day. You will suffer through a great number of remorses. These are very scary verses. I mean, imagine like when the disbeliever sees hell from afar, like they can hear its rage and fuming. I mean, uh, and they're all shackled, thrown through a narrow place, and they're declaring their remorse, and just having remorse for anything. I mean, first of all, we're not supposed to have remorse, but in the sense that everything is designed by God and predestined in this world. But wasting this lifetime when we were given our final chance to redeem ourselves, and seeing the message and the messenger, and the proofs. Imagine a life of a disbeliever who was given all these things, and they decided to come so close to the message and then turn away. I mean, how remorseful do you think they would be when they see this type of retribution for themselves when they, get resurrected in the hereafter? I mean, yeah, they will definitely declare a great number of remorses. May God save us from this. But it says you will not just declare a single remorse on that day; you'll suffer through a great number of remorses. I mean, that is probably like the most extreme description of depression that I can find in the Quran. When you are just remorseful so much, like just there's one after another. You're just full of regrets and remorse here, and it will continue last for eternity. So it's the most miserable thing you could imagine. I mean, I could imagine. Um, Rewards for the righteous, verse 15. Say, is it better or the eternal paradise that is promised for the righteous? It is their well-deserved reward and a well-deserved destiny. They get anything they wish therein forever. This is your Lord's irrevocable promise. On that day when he summons them, together with the idols they had set up beside God, he will say, have you misled these servants of mine, or did they go astray on their own? They will say, be you glorified. It was not right for us to set up any lords beside you, but you allowed them to enjoy together with their parents. Consequently, they disregarded the message and thus became wicked people. They have disbelieved in the message you have given them, and consequently, you can neither protect them from the retribution they have incurred, nor can you help them in any way. Anyone among you who commits evil, we will commit him to severe retribution. So, obviously, after this terrible description of hell, invariably when God mentions the description of or allegories of hell, he invariably mentions paradise too. And here, um, he also tells us about paradise as a comparison, of what you have a choice for as an alternative. I mean, you could choose to believe and end up in the most wonderful place you can ever imagine, where you can get anything you want forever. I mean, it's like, just think about it. It's like You see that kind of stuff in like the movies, even the best movies. You only get three wishes, right? With the genie, and then that's it. But like here it's like you can get anything you want for eternity, and you'll have it. There's no like gotchas or anything like that with that. I mean, you just enjoy perfect life. And what a no-brainer that would be for anyone to see this message and decide. Uh, I mean, how tough is this choice? It's so simple. Uh, but obviously, if you disbelieve in the hereafter, you get stuck and you just make all the wrong choices. And but the fact is that it says that these people who uh, worshipped idols or followed idols, God will bring them out as witnesses on the day of judgment, just to prove to these people that just to prove to these people that they were gone astray. And um, basically, uh, for example, I mean, you have Jesus as a messenger, and Jesus came and he preached the true message to worship God alone. And then look what they did. Other people, people idolize like the saints and scholars and rabbis. Surprisingly nowadays, submitters are also idolizing rabbis, and you guys know what I'm talking about. But I mean, all these people on the day of judgment, will say, yeah, we never told them to idolize, beside God, and you allowed them to enjoy, and consequently they disregarded the message, and it's not their fault, obviously, and they disbelieve. So God says you can neither protect them from the retribution they have incurred, nor can you help them in any way. I mean, this person could be your brother, your sister, your mother, your father, um, people that you truly love and you want them to be guided and saved. But God says, anyone who commits evil will pay for it. Doesn't matter, if it's your son, and that throws away the whole concept of intercession, because you cannot save people. You don't have the power to save people who are destined for hell. I mean, you can only save those who are destined to be saved because of their own worthiness by God, and God's knowledge of those people. Verse 20, messengers are just human beings. We did not send any messengers before you who did not eat food and walk in the markets. We thus test you by each other. Will you steadfastly persevere? Your Lord is here. Those who do not expect to meet us said, if only angels could come down to us, or we could see our Lord, we would then believe. Indeed, they have committed a gross arrogance and have produced a gross blasphemy. The day they see the angels, it will not be good news for the guilty. They will say, now we are irreversibly confined. We will look at all their work, all the works they have done, and render them null and void. The dwellers of paradise are far better on that day. They will hear better news. The heaven will break apart into masses of clouds, and the angels will descend in multitudes. All sovereignty on that day belongs to the most gracious. For the disbelievers, it will be a difficult day. Um, so the Quran is telling us, yes, the messengers are just human beings like you and me, in the sense that, they eat the same kind of food you eat, they walk in the markets like you do, they have to go get their food and everything, just like we have to do everything. They're just human beings in that sense. But the only thing that distinguishes them is the fact that God has given them the message, given them the wisdom, to pass it across to other humans so they can be guided. And it's part of the test. You can't have a messenger accompanied by angels and treasures and walk in the skies, for example. It's very easy for God to do, obviously, but that nullifies the whole test. So when that happens, that will be the end of the world. basically. And when they see angels come in multitudes, that God says heaven will break apart. But that on that day, it will not benefit anybody, because the test will be over. Like the time that you're supposed to respond to the test, is over. So it doesn't matter if you have the correct answer afterwards. I mean, it's like you saw I mean, we see all the answers now, but the thing is, like, it's obvious, like, beyond doubt, that everybody will see with the eye of certainty everything in front of them. So there is be no question of whether you believe it or not believe it, because everything will be in front of our eyes. Uh, and I mean, obviously, the believers will be in paradise, but for the disbelievers, as it says, we'll look at all the works they have done, and render them null and void. So, as we all know, idol worship is the only unforgivable offense. So, you could be the most charitable person, the most kind, loving person on this earth, and help people, and be the most altruistic person on the planet, but if you don't believe in God, the way you should, and know all of God's qualities, and everything, including His omnipotence, to be able to resurrect the dead and all of that, um, and you commit idol worship, your works will become nullified. They'll carry no weight. But on the other hand, people who believed, I mean, God will overlook their sins and multiply their rewards for them, uh, because they're the ones who made the right choices for the most part. And God, being forgiver and merciful, will be gracious enough and merciful enough to forgive a lot of our shortcomings and sins, because we know He knows we're humans and we're created weak and we're not always perfect. But for the disbelievers, I mean, just everything they did is just gonna go down the drain, because they did not fulfill the basic requirement, which was to believe in God and worship Him alone. And that's how important it is, to dedicate ourselves to worshiping God alone. And on the day of judgment, I mean, all these people, everything that they're doing, I mean, on the day of judgment, this test will be over. And right now, I mean, we see God's mercy in the sense that God is patient, and He's giving these people plenty of chances over and over again, every single day, to make the right choice, so they have no excuse on the day of judgment. But then the test will be over, and on that day, I mean, all all judgments will be final about these people. And people who wanted to please other people, or please their egos instead of pleasing God, obviously will end up paying the price. I mean, people will have to answer to God for everything that they're doing. And I think that's pretty much, yeah, all at this point. So, may God guide us, continue to guide us to be one of those people that can be saved, and continue to guide us to the right path. It's very easy for Satan. I mean, Satan's obviously, we're all Satan's number one targets, meaning all the people who are actually on their way to being saved. Those are the people that Satan's after. They're his number one targets, because people who have already fallen off the path, he's not concerned about them anymore, because they're already gone far astray. But there's people that could potentially make it. Satan's job is to misguide as many people as possible. So he's trying his very best, because not only people who are on the right path could save themselves, they could also have the potential to help other people, and show them the right way as well, if God wills. And so these are Satan's number one targets. So let's continue to ask God to guide us and help us, so that we can save ourselves and redeem our souls, God willing. All right. So with this, I'd like to end, and then you guys can, if you have any questions or comments, feel free.
MashaAllah, thank you,
Mashallah,
Salomon.
very,
Thank you, Masha
yeah,
Thanks.
mashallah, very good job.
Nice study, MashaAllah. I want to comment on the verse number 7, typical utterances of disbelievers. And they said, how come this messenger eats the food and walks in the markets? If only an angel could come down with him to serve with him as a preacher, or if only a treasure could be given to him, or if only he could possess an orchard from which he eats. The messengers also said, you are following a bewitched man. The transgressors also said, you are following a bewitched man. So, throughout the history, the human problem is that when a messenger comes, obviously, for humans, God says, if we were the colonies of angels, then an angel would come as a messenger. But we are humans on the planet, so a human messenger is chosen from among the people who can relate to people um, as a human being, because the message is for the human beings. Uh, but they always want to see something very divinely created, why God will choose a human being. Either it's jealousy or doubting, that something normal looking, who can eat, gets married, has children, you know, would be so bringing such an important message. Because the problem is they always idolize the messenger after his death. So every generation idolize it, doesn't take heed when the messenger comes from the message, but once they pass away, they make them such big idols, because that's what they want to do. They worship the image of these creatures, and make them gods beside God, because they cannot think about God, being the full God and in charge of everything. So one of the criteria is to believe in the unseen. The God is what we cannot see, whom we cannot see, but we have to believe because of our natural instinct, which God has put in like a chip in every human being since their birth. And take the message. When a messenger comes, they always are supported with the proof. So the proof is always is like tangible. You cannot uh, negate it, that this is something is possible through a human being. So God sends a sufficient proofs, and these messengers are supported by that. But they ridicule the messengers in their lifetime, and after they're passed away, then they worship them as gods. Okay, that's it for now. Okay, if no one is speaking, I'll speak again, inshallah. This, what I just said, it also is mentioned in verse number 3. Yet they set up beside him gods who do not create anything, they themselves are created. and who possess no power to even harm or benefit themselves, nor do they possess any power to control life or death or resurrection. So, same thing here, they in the verses I read, 7 and 8, they're doubting that these people are the messengers of God because they are not, loaded with some enormous amount of treasure, or they are acting like human beings going to markets for shopping, they're doing groceries and eating and whatnot. And then here, God says they set up them beside him gods who do not create anything. I mean, these are just human beings. All they have is a message from God to deliver to people. They don't they don't have their own such superhuman powers to do anything. Neither they can create or they control life and death of anybody. All life and death and everything which is happening in this world is controlled by God. This world and everywhere in the space and all the seven universes. But these messengers and so-called some saints and become so important for people that they forget about God. That God is the one who created them. God is the one who provides for them, controls life and death. It's so sad. What needed to be done was to take heed from the message, which they don't when they are alive, but they forget about the message and worship these human beings as idols beside God and forget about God. So human being continuously um, is going for the loss due to their idolatrous nature.
Actually, anybody else has any comments?
Yeah, inshallah, I'll make a comment in a few minutes. You're just outside. I'm going home.
Um, yes. I think Huda has a comment.
Number 11 says the real reason. In fact, they have disbelieved in the hour, which is the day of resurrection. And we have prepared for those who disbelieve in the hour a flaming hell. So this is the one of the criteria to believe. Uh, it's not that everybody says they believe in God. Most people say they believe in some God. But most people have strange ideas about the hereafter. Some don't believe. Some have wishful thinking that prophets will intercede on behalf of their followers because they believed in them. Now, just believing that Prophet Muhammad was a messenger and a prophet of God, or Jesus was a prophet of God, or Abraham was, is not our guarantee for salvation. What we believe, the message they brought, we had to believe in that. And that includes believing in God and the hereafter, the unseen, which includes the angels, his messengers, his scriptures. That, but the belief in the hereafter is very, very important. Like literally believing it, like is solid proof. Just like we have to believe in the unseen God, because in these verses we just read that the whole purpose will be um, gone if people demanded, if they want to see God or angels, then they will believe. The the thing is, the test is to believe in the unseen, you know God, angels, hereafter. We have to really believe in it. Then we will be able to, because we believe, then we follow God's commandments, because we know that we will be answerable on that day. If one thinks like, I can get away with anything in this life, and just keep saying I believe in God, or they do think there is a God, who doesn't care about anything, will just from this life go into another nice life. That's absolutely wishful thinking, because if we didn't follow God's commandments, that means we did not live a righteous life. That means we did not grow our soul sufficient enough to make it to heaven in the hereafter. So, believing in the hereafter promotes the idea of, it's like, yes, I have a goal. I have to make it in the to heaven in the hereafter, and this is what God wants me to do. This is the way to heaven. Otherwise, why people follow a religion to the core if there is no hereafter. So that really makes is the deal maker or breaker, that if there is no belief in the hereafter, then people just pick and choose from religion whatever suits their lifestyle, and that much they will practice. But if they for sure know, if we do not commit idol worship and follow the scripture, follow the guidance which came through his messengers, that's the only way we make it to heaven. Otherwise, there is a terrible retribution for eternity. That is the key thing, you know, which makes somebody a believer. That is the belief in the hereafter, in God and his messengers and his angels and his scriptures. And that's it for now.
So, can you guys hear me?
Oh yeah.
It's okay. So, I want to talk about the verse. Let me put it up. Sorry. So, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So, verse number 12. When it sees them from afar, they will hear its rage and fuming. And when they are thrown into it through a narrow place, all shackled, they will declare their remorse. He will not declare just a single remorse on that day. He will suffer through a great number of remorse. So, Masha Allah, so I never pay attention to that verse, remorse. When I look into the definition, like in Urdu, it says pashtawa, like like we see that remorse every day. People are making bad choices about job, different things, and families. Sometimes people get divorced, and then they later realize, and then they have remorse. So when the remorse is, for example, if you go to a game show and in two cases, I mean, and one of them has a prize and the other one is empty. Now here you don't know which one has the prize, so you're just guessing. I mean, you're guessing and you pick the wrong one. You do feel bad that, oh, I should have picked the other one, but you don't have the knowledge. So in that case, there's really, you feel bad, but there's really not remorse because there's nothing you can do. When you cannot do anything, then the remorse is not bad. If you're married and or if you change your job, and if you make a wrong decision not knowing which job is better, like you have to pick between two jobs and you have a very basic idea and you just take a gamble and say, I think I'm just going to take this one, and it comes out to be a bad one, the other one was better. Yeah, there's like really you didn't know, but the problem comes in when you know something and still a choice. That's when you really feel remorse. That's when it really hits you. So God is saying then when they get on when they see the hell, and that's when you know sometimes the remorse is far more painful. The psychological pain is far more worse than actual physical pain. It's just you feel it in your heart, and it makes you depressed, makes you sad. You will like you back for some physical pain and take this pain away, because that's how worse the remorse is, especially when you know that you could have done something. So here, over and over, over and over, over and over in the Quran, page after page, page after page, page after page, God is inviting. And literally, God is not using the word please, but if you study the Quran, and you will come to understand that, my God, your Lord is inviting you such a humble way. Please examine what is this. Don't be one after another, example after example, pro and cons side by side with hell and heaven. That at least come and study with open heart. And what happens? People are heedless and they just turn their head away. They don't want to even listen. They don't even want to ponder to at least come to realize what God is offering and living their life. And we know clearly that how short is life. You see every now and then people pass away, and this is the reality is. And when you go to the next life, and on that day when you're standing and all the judgments are being issued, there's a court of law in God's kingdom and everybody's getting the result. And imagine when you're going towards the hell. And what a picture that is, just allegorical, but in these simple words we can imagine. Like if I go to Hawaii and I tell you you've never been to Hawaii, and I say imagine sandy beach and trees, palm trees, and wind blowing and this and that, you can have at least some kind of imagination what a Hawaii looks like. So like telling way we cannot understand what heaven and hell looks like, but just paying attention that when he sees them afar, so it seems like the hell, we know that every living organism, every cell, every atom is glorifying God. So we will realize that every creature, it has a conscience, probably it has some kind of thoughts or something, that hell in itself will be enraged. Why? Because the hell can see these people have been idolizing with my Lord, because the hell in itself is obeying God, and hell's Lord is God. So imagine when God says that they say they begotten a son, the sky and earth, and God is saying that I'm just paraphrasing, they shatter with thunder. I mean, scared so much that it's like they will shatter like a glass breaks in part, because this all bad that is that being idolizing. So when hell sees these people from far away, that these people have been idolizing with my Lord, that's one of the reasons that the hell will fear in rage. What a rage is, like when you somebody tell you something really bad, you get enraged, you get angry. So this, and it will uh, they will hear this rage of and fuming from far away. And then the next allegorical God says is a narrow place. And when you're going into it through a narrow place in itself and shackled, we can just imagine a picture yourself. I mean, there's a lot of horror movies. You can see somebody's shackled with feet tied and arms tied behind, and going through a narrow place into this belly of that thing. Just imagine. I mean, we can imagine how the picture is, and then at that time they will declare the remorse. Uh, and just imagine what a depression and sadness people will have, that they could have done something when you're driving, and then somebody comes from side, and then you did all the best thing you do, but they come and hit you. There's nothing you can do. You have a peace of mind that there's nothing in my power I could have done, so you accept the. But when you can do something and not choose not to do it, and when you see the consequences, that remorse in itself is the one of the worst pain. And we should realize that right now we have chance to examine the truth. God has sent us the final scripture. At least come and sit down. Maybe at least, because if we don't even study, then the remorse is even worse. That we will say, I mean, at least I could have opened the book, at least to see. Maybe I might have. I mean, people will be saying that I was so wicked. I mean, I didn't even bother the chance to even look into the miracle of 19 to see if this book is from God, and then pay more attention to. Maybe I could have been guided, but I was so heedless that I didn't even pay attention. So that verse, when you were talking about remorse, and I'm like start looking into it, I'm like, Masha Allah, that in itself is a very, very strong motivating factor. And that's my comment. Masha Allah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think another thing I wanted to say the about the surah, the verse calls it the statute book, and I mean the surah, the title of the surah is a statute book, right? And so this is uh, this is one of the characteristics of the Quran, that it is the statute book, and the fact that we can judge, the one of the principles by which we can judge, because God is the one that who created the laws, these statutes, and so this is the statute book, and based on this we can judge. Like when people say that, this is something people we hear from people a lot. In fact, the messenger of the covenant said this is one of Satan's favorite principles: do not judge. But one of the characteristics of the Quran is that it is the statute book. So by based on this book, we can judge between good and bad, and right and wrong, and hypocrite and believer. I mean, right now, as always, Satan's always very active, like trying to discourage people from being able to judge other people. They're saying, well, they're all, as long as you're praying the same way and doing the same practices or whatnot, we're all the same. But the Quran has, for example, has so many descriptions and detailed descriptions of and traits of hypocrites, and it has the detailed description and traits of believers, and so we must, and then God says that we don't befriend the hypocrites, or things like that. So we must be able to make that distinction, and if we want to be saved and we don't want to end up with the hypocrites. Because what happens is if you tell yourself this, that there's no hypocrites and we're all submitters and blah blah blah, I mean, this is a really um, something that is like a wishful thinking, obviously, first of all, and it may sound good because it seems to encourage that we're all united and whatnot. But the thing is that it's so dangerous because you can say that we're all submitters, and then you can be surrounded by hypocrites, and then the hypocrites rub off on you, and you end up being a hypocrite just like them, because now you've turned yourself into one by not heeding God's commandments of not to befriend them. The same reason why God tells us to force ourselves to, in the Quranic study groups to be with the believers is so the believers will also, be a good influence on each other. So in the same way, when people uh, stop wanting to make a distinction, then they'll end up marrying hypocrites. They'll end up, living with them, allying with them, all kinds of stuff, and they could end up being just like them. So that's why I mean, there's a big good reason for everything. There's a reason for these verses that God has put in the Quran. So people cannot like basically, I mean, and the Messenger of the Covenant also when he talked on the verse about hypocrites, he says they sit amongst the believers, they pretend to be believers. We think they are brothers and sisters. They can be really kind and loving and people and stuff like that, and then they go around and they spread their poison stouts. So they are the worst of the worst, and they're destined for the lowest pit of hell. So they're the most dangerous people in dangerous category in the Quran, that worst category in the Quran, right? And so by Satan trying to tell people that this category is like almost non-existent, he's really trying to, make them like these invisible forces that can go and penetrate the believers and destroy them and drag them to hell with them. And for to some degree, I mean, that seems to be working with groups that have decided to uphold this sort of ideology. And we see people digressing slowly, and losing the tenets of faith, and so to speak. And so literally, in the most literal sense, pretty much actually. So we have to be very careful there, and just this is a reminder for us, the title of the surah, that this is our statute book, and it has all the laws of our salvation. At the same time, it allows us to make distinction. It's also all uh, allows us to make that distinction. So yeah.
So on that, what you're talking about, I just have a question that people are, it's like in similar gatherings, there are obvious signs somebody is disobeying the Quran, and there are some hidden that we don't know, and it's their personal life. Like we were reading Surah Nur, the 24,
Mhm.
and a lot of them, like in their home life or whatever, if somebody's like not following God's rule, so then you call them hypocrite, or like
I mean, a
like there's
hypocrite
100
has to
commandments
be
in the
a
Quran.
hypocrite has to be a hypocrite's
Mhm,
not someone, for example, like you see like one verse about hypocrites, and you see that
mhm,
in someone, and then you say, well, obviously this person is a hypocrite because I see this one quality. I mean, you and I could exhibit some of those qualities too, right? But like, it's not just like, for example, like I describe to you that a cat has four legs, right? and then and then
mhm,
you go and you spot a horse with four legs, and you say this is a cat because Solomon said that a cat has four legs. But there's other description that the cat has a complete description. If I say the cat
right.
has a furry tail, and she is this tall, or has eyes look like this and has whiskers, then you'll know what a cat is. And so when you go look at an animal, you're going to analyze the animal completely, the entire description of it, and see, okay, does this have this thing? Does it have whiskers? Does it have leg, four legs? All those things, and then you can come to the conclusion, right? But the thing is, people can't. Typically, what these people do, even who say that they don't believe in this thing, will misjudge people left and right, first of all. But then, obviously, they have to look at the full picture too, that if you think someone is not a believer, then you have to make sure that they don't meet any criteria of a believer, or in whole, like you have to look at all the like you have to judge equitably, right? So you can't just go by one thing and say, well, this person's obviously a disbeliever. So I mean, if you are that careful, then you not make a mistake. It's for me, it's like I mean, when I make that distinction, I mean, I see signs after signs after signs after signs. So I'm like, okay, well, I mean, I can't help it. It's just, I mean, I don't, I mean, I can't pretend I'm blind, and hurt my soul. If I'm
Right.
seeing these signs, there's obviously a reason for it. God is telling me something. Like I'm obviously going to hurt myself at some point.
But if somebody says they're a believer and I mean they're a submitter, and you in gatherings, they don't really act anything out of the visible signs of a submitter. In their personal life, whatever they're doing, which I don't know, then I cannot judge them, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you don't know, then you don't know. But if you keep
Yeah.
seeing the signs, then you can't deny them,
Right.
right? But
Right.
someone says they're a submitter, and you don't know much about their life, you can't judge without knowing them, right? So
Right.
yeah. But the thing is that those signs that are there, I mean, if you are careful in life, I mean, you'll see
Mm-hmm.
people will fit in one of those categories. Either they will be believers or they will be hypocrites. I mean, there won't be like in between. I mean, you can call yourself a submitter and then you're neither, right?
Yeah.
You can't be neither.
Yeah.
You're either gonna fall on this side or that side.
Right. Sure.
But I mean, for me, a lot of people who call themselves submitters, even though I may not know them personally, right? But
Mm-hmm.
what I what I can't help notice is that when they preach things contrary to the Quran, you know, to people like publicly, then it becomes public information. All their actions, speak, loud and clear, and so, and when you see them, defend each other and all that all these types of things, I mean, that that obviously is a huge, huge, like, sign for me. They advocate, um, falsehood, and prohibit righteousness. Basically, that's one of the traits of hypocrites.
Yeah, that's obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we should, I guess, stand up against it and
Mm.
clarify that this is wrong. I mean, I was one going around. I saw an article about something about that only the meat that is dedicated to somebody else is forbidden. Anything else is not. And I'm like, where do you say that?
Mm.
So I put a my post on it that there's four places God says, and one place God literally words used mention says the word anything, and the
Mm.
other three places God is using the word meat. So I said it covers everything, and then I said, well, would you want to rather eat something that has somebody else dedicated? I mean, even is a
Mm.
glass of water, maybe. Would you
Yeah.
want to drink that? I
Yeah.
wouldn't. Yeah.
Exactly. And the same person who started the whole meat argument,
Right.
is going around online in another group and saying that Abraham, the Quran says that Abraham was circumcised in the Quran. It said the
Hmm.
Quran says that
Oh,
Abraham was circumcised.
in Quran.
Yeah,
Oh my God.
because the verse that says Abraham the monotheist,
Hmm.
and so he says this word means monotheist. It means someone who observes the contact prayers and gives the charity, and it also means someone who is circumcised. The Quran says Abraham was circumcised. Yeah, so like I mean that's complete, trait of a disbeliever. Obviously, like God says, those who are diseased in their hearts will, go for the multiple meaning verses to try to extricate a certain meaning. You know, so he did basically did the same thing with the food and meats thing. Because the in the Arabic it says in that which is dedicated to
Yeah.
other than God. So and that could be meat, it could be animals, depending on the context. But
Right.
yeah, so and so, yeah, I mean, so these kind of things you become very obvious, and then people stand by it and then defend it and make it their, mission to, promote their personal opinions when they're fall in love with them, then they're fall in love with them. So that exposes them basically. And all these things, really are in place to expose these people too, like when God says the believers, for example, will uphold the Quran alone, and other people who don't believe in the hereafter, will fall for fancy words, right? And then you
Yeah.
see a whole bunch of people fall for those words. I mean, what does that say about these people? Obviously, they're not guided,
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a very serious situation. Like they're using remorse. For some people, they came into submission and not be able to be successful. The remorse could be even worse for these people.
Hmm.
That so close and then
Oh
yet.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. Because and their destination is gonna be the worst
Yeah.
destination too. These people who came so close. Yeah.
Yeah, and the blessing in this world is when you get hurt, like some tragedy happens and somebody dies in your family, is it's shocking. But God has
Hmm.
this is a blessing from God that over time
Hmm.
the pain starts to deteriorate and slowly, slowly we become normal. And this is actually a blessing. Imagine if that was not happening and you get hurt and the pain every day you wake up with the same pain, every day you wake up with the same pain. Imagine the suffering would that be. And we cannot imagine in hell, would God take that system take away, that you will have remorse every day and just not going away, you're feeling pain, the psychological pain every single day. Imagine that. What
Yeah,
if God
exactly.
doesn't take that away? Just imagine that.
Well, yeah, yeah, the eternal. I mean, I mean, anything, any of the descriptions of hell that you think about, you really think about, like when it says they'll be confined in iron pots.
Right. Oh yes.
Yeah. And your skins are being burned every day and being destroyed. I mean, that's unimaginably like horrible. Like it's the. I mean, it's beyond traumatizing. Right? So I mean, but it's yeah, but I mean, God is the most just, and that's what they deserve because obviously disbelieving in God and allying with Satan on something so I mean, it's a gross blasphemy they commit. So, but the same way you can see God's mercy. God says He's the most strict in enforcing retribution, and He's the most merciful and He's the most gracious. And I mean, the description of paradise is so beautiful. Imagine that if we are, blessed by God to make it, that we can find anything we wish for eternity. I mean, and you have servants, immortal servants that God says that look like scattered pearls, and how amazing is that? And you get anything you wish. I mean, you'd be like better than any kings or queens on this earth that we know. You'll have like mentions upon mentions and so many blessings, anything you desire. I mean, so why would people not want that? why people want to be miserable here and in the hereafter. It's not worth it. I mean, for people, but they will. That's why they will be so remorseful when they realize, well, it was such an easy thing to do. Like all we had to do was do our contact prayers, sincerely follow the Quran, give to our charity, let go of our personal opinion, just obey God and His Messenger, and just lead a righteous life, and we could have had this. And but think about those who make it. I mean, imagine, you know, being one of those people, God willing, and how amazing that would feel like, having that achievement, your whole life. I mean, people have a different definition of success in life, but being truly successful means, and you're truly rewarded by God, and you know, so subhanallah. I mean, that these descriptions are there for us to motivate us. I mean, there is just not negative. There's just also positive reinforcement, and we have incentives. I mean, that was the incentive for us that we decided to come here. I mean, it wasn't just uh, that. I mean, the people, could have repented, but also the incentive was there that, if we pass the test, the reward would be better than anything ever. I mean, the animals and trees are not going to get the same reward as the people, who are going to pass, who are going to go through the test and decide to worship God alone on their free will and pass the test. They will be in a much better place. Um, so that incentive was there for us. But the thing is that humans, like God says, they're transgressing and ignorant, and we thought that it was just going to be a piece of cake. Like people think now. People who even people who call themselves submitters. I mean, they just do their bare minimum, and they think they're saved. Just that they got submission, and then everything else goes, and then they think they're saved, and they really underestimate the level of the test that they're in. you know and that's what happens. You underestimate your enemy, you're going to fail your test. You're going to fail it miserably. I mean, God calls these people the worst losers. That they think that whose works in this life are totally astray, and they think they're doing good. So just imagine that. God willing, you know we are not one of those people who are wishful thinkers and stuff. We have to be really vigilant, hardworking, striving submitters. We should not leave. We should not leave any stone unturned. We should try to aim for the highest. So there's no chance of our failure. God willing. And,
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of small things that we don't like saying. Not taking the name of God before eating is, I think God says, uh, the most abominable or something like that. And not even simple thing that we
mhm,
forget. If I mean, there's a lot of things that God talks about, like eating the dead brother's flesh. It's like as allegorical. God is saying that nor shall you backbite one another.
mhm,
Is as abominable as eating flesh of your dead brother. So there's, like you say, this surah is about Furqan, the judge. This is the standard, the gold standard of living, and this is our manual for. And if there's like 100 rules written in it, and those the first 3 rules are no idol worship, contact prayer, and give charity. And so God mentions this over and over. But people think that this is all. Some people think that this is enough to do, and they can backbite and they can do whatever they want other than that, and consider it as a smaller sin. But these are all commandments from God, and so if we think that these are not important, and we are taking serious risks on our life. Only one chance to live. Would you rather do that? Like we use the example that, for example, if you have to do skydiving, wouldn't you just take every precaution to make sure everything you possibly said, that you don't want to leave any stone unturned? You want to make sure everything is working, because what if something goes wrong? And should we take chance in this? That's why God says read the Quran cover to cover, so that it keep reminding us all those He has assigned us to follow, inshallah.
Yeah, just wanted to, both of you talked about remorse. Remorse is something like if somebody has committed a crime and they're guilty about it, they have remorse, like really feel they did something wrong, right? Even like somebody's on a trial here in this world for felony they committed, and judges will see that if they feel any remorse, that that means they can reform. If they really feel that, wow, in that moment something they did was really bad and it has caused so much pain, um, on other, or who are close to this person, or whatever crime they did. And those people have the ability to probably reform later on, because it all starts from that remorse or acknowledging that they made a mistake, and they still have a chance. They serve the time and they come out, right? um, and if they have a very good behavior, their sentences are shortened due to their good behavior, because these people had the capacity to reform afterwards. But it all starts from real remorse and the guilt. That shows that this person is not criminal by nature. It just happened in that moment. And right after that, they felt what a terrible thing they did. But in the hereafter, they will have nothing but remorse, because now it's too late to reform, you know? And no matter how much remorse they have, and it is so painful to feel that remorse constantly, like Adam, you said, mashallah, that imagine day after day you wake up with that guilt and miserable, like, and God says it would not be just one remorse, it would be remorse about every bad thing they did. They will see things so clearly. Even God says in the Quran that your vision will be as strong as steel, right? That you will have so much clarity what you did wrong and what you did right. You will see without any gray areas. And imagine the remorse, having the remorse, but not being having the ability to reform anymore. It's the finality of it. That you will be confined in these narrow places, shackled, and like, like in this world, people do that cage animals into narrow places. They cannot leave. Um, Human beings are really terrible species who are so cruel to other species. My goodness. So that remorse will be constant but useless. That they wasted all the chances to do anything about. If they had that remorse in this world before their death, they would have had a chance to probably, escape hell. And this is really, we have to, when God describes in these words, you feel the pain, you feel that miserable feeling in your gut. It is really sad.
Yeah, Masha, that's a good point. In this life, when we have remorse about something, we learn from it and we try not to repeat our mistake so that we don't fall into the same situation. So we prevent from that happening. But you're right, as that in the hereafter, there's nothing we can do. That's it. Whatever is done and done, the judgment has been issued. Mashallah.
Yeah, sometimes you listen to some famous trial going on, they're showing on TV, and the judges say some person was a serial killer or something, and they say uh, the defendant showed no remorse, and they're so hard-hearted, and they have no emotions or no empathy, like sociopaths lack empathy. They literally do not have empathy. They don't feel what others feel. Like if you have empathy, you feel the pain of somebody else, right? Or misery, you feel it in your gut. These people don't have that. They lack that emotion, that complete lack. And so they know that even when these people will come out of the prison, they will do the same act again. That's the psychology. They have this is like literally scientific, that they are incurable. Some they do that and they come out, and then they commit the same crime again because they never felt the remorse, and they wouldn't feel it. Now remorse is something, is basically your conscience, and that conscience will be awakened. Even they didn't have remorse here, but over there they will see and realize what have they done. And the remorse, everybody will have that remorse. And then God talks about people will be feuding with each other, mutual blaming. There's so many descriptions about what people will be feeling and doing and saying and have, it's all nothing. Whatever you see, that picture is tells you about misery and darkness and pain and remorse and blaming. It's just not a, it's very, very bad place for eternity. My goodness. A soul had to be really, really sleeping to not think about the hereafter. Anyways, that's the criteria to really, if God has described heaven and hell so clearly, that if we don't take heed from those descriptions, that we are really to blame. God says, we should be mindful of the hereafter, because that's where the real life starts. Okay, I'm done.
Well, mashallah, sister, you made a very good point. I see that's what we learn from the Quran studies. That I didn't. There's another angle you put into it, that like I've seen some cases in the court. Yeah, you're right. So we had a case where a police officer accidentally killed someone, but the police officer was such in remorse, so hurtful inside that by mistake she did it. It was not even like she was angry. She walked in her apartment but it was by mistakenly on the wrong floor. So she was somebody else. She thought somebody is in her home. So, and that's what happened. So it was accident by mistake. And when they were doing the case in the court, she was literally crying, and she wanted to hug the person who died, his brother. And the family of the victims were even crying for her because they see her pain. And so they wanted to forgive her. So they gave her minimum punishment, but it was, yeah, you're right. We see a lot of cases where the person who did the crime is not even nothing, like they have no sympathy. They're just sitting there arrogantly and not even caring about it, and you even feel more angry to them that at least you should feel shame what you did. So you're right, in this world people are committing idol worship and they are showing no remorse. But when their soul is awakened on that day and then everything becomes visible, that's when they're going to start showing all the remorse, which was before hidden. Imagine somebody who does a crime and showing no remorse, but once this person realizes, that's when the pain starts. But at that point, when you cannot go back and change something, then that's another pain that you're stuck with. MashaAllah.
Yeah, because people who don't have feel remorse is like they're totally under control of Satan. So when in the hereafter, Satan will have no control over people anymore. Then they're gonna feel the remorse. Like, whoa, we were truly hypnotized, you know? They will realize they did all those things with their own free will. But that's where, Quran tells us how devil hypnotizes people that they can't even feel if they want to sympathy towards anybody, because devil just tells them, oh, whatever, this person deserved it, I did the right thing. It's horrible. Remorse is actually your conscience, that even like the story you said about the woman, the cop, she made a mistake. Like, her remorse would be so much higher than somebody who even did intentionally, right? Like, oh my God, what have I done? Because she had no intention to even harm anyone. And obviously, that who shows remorse has the capacity to actually reform.
Do you guys think maybe we can end the stream now?
Yeah, we can wrap up now, inshallah.
Okay,
Yeah, inshallah.
inshallah. Um, who would like to lead the study next one?
I guess Saturday is my turn, inshallah.
Your turn. Okay, inshallah. So, thank you guys for joining us for tonight's study. Our next study will be on Saturday, God willing, at 9:30 Pacific time, and our teacher is going to be Nuzat, God willing. God bless you guys. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Assalamu alaikum.